All right, welcome to 1134 Story Podcast. I am Steve Cohen. I've got Trice Head back in the studio today,
Hey.
and we're going to be on a ride. We were just talking about that,
Yeah.
right? And you are never too lost to be found. So, man, you have been in the entertainment industry for how long now?
I don't know the official number, but over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to say because you kind of like, it ages, it kind of starts dating you.
You look like you're about 23, so and I'm only 29. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I started it out of the womb, basically.
Yeah.
No, really, actually, my mom got us into community theater when I was probably, my first show was Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I was little Jacob in that, and the Baton Rouge Community Theater, and that was like kind of the first year into the theater space. And then from there I've been in what's funny, because when I recount my, kind of to the point of our conversation today, when I recount my like upbringing in this industry, church actually falls right in the middle of that. So
Wow.
I did community theater, I did live entertainment, and I've done church and broadcast television through church. So it's funny that to the kind of what we were talking about today. I know I'm breaking that now, but
breaking news. We're going to be talking about balancing church and the entertainment world.
Yeah.
Right?
There we go, yeah.
So it is this interesting thing because it keeps on coming up in the media, on social media, everywhere. It's part of the topic. We recently even saw, this big article, male stripper brought into a church, which he wasn't actually a male stripper.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pole dance. It was just a media headline that everybody was trying to grab a hold of, which talks to the whole thing about everybody wanting entertainment. We want to be entertained. We want to see the drama. We want to see all those things. And I look back, so I wasn't a believer. I was an atheist, didn't go to church. But I look back, that was for 20 plus years, but I look back and I saw all of these programs that, in plays and programs, they're not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. But when they're out of balance and the performance ends up kind of taking the spotlight instead of God, man, that's really tough to deal with. Yeah. And here you are in the midst of it. You're actually one of the guilty members doing the production, right?
Yeah. Well, I've like everything in life, we rationalize what we do. We want to find purpose in our work, right? And so for me, like coming up in church, I'm so thankful for the mentors of people. I learned a lot of things from the guys that were in the church world. I learned a lot of things from the guys in the secular world in entertainment. I do entertainment lighting, is what I tell people. Yeah. So a lot to do with like the visuals of what's happening in the performance space. Yeah. I'm grateful for all of that, but I have at times had to kind of dig in and say, is this, kind of rationalize, and honestly, I've tried to find a way to get out of it. I've always wanted to be in some sort of ministry, and God hasn't opened that door to get me out of it yet. But yeah, it's interesting, the crossover. I spent a lot of time doing network marketing sales meetings, which are like huge. If you're in that space, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, I mean, it's like, think of it, it's just like everybody gets together and hoopla, and specifically in direct sales, where some call it pyramid schemes, whatever. There is this weird, like, it almost has this churchy vibe. Yeah. And a lot of the people in that space would claim to be followers of Jesus, or Christians, if you will, culturally speaking. And you start kind of seeing this blurry line, and you go, what are we doing here? And it's almost becomes in that space. Like, I'm not even talking about yet, we haven't gotten into the four walls of the church. I'm talking about in an arena, in some city somewhere, all of these people, there's people standing on stage trying to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but it is in a way a manipulation. They're trying to sell a product to encourage, motivate people to take the product that they have created, take it outside of that event, and sell it, right? And if you think about that in like a Christian context, that's similar to what we have learned in our context, right?
Yeah.
And so when you sit in that and you come back and you're sitting in church and you're going,
well, church is selling God.
Yeah.
That's almost what it's actually come to, right?
I actually have a really funny story. I'll try to be really fast. My wife and I got into a direct sales insurance company when we first were married, and we were having that conversation, right? We love Jesus. We got married, and we got married on the mission field. We were on a mission trip. Is where we didn't get married on a mission field. We met. Our relationship started on the way home from a mission trip.
Yeah.
That's it. So anyway, right when we first got married, we're in this direct sales. We're just trying to find ways to make money, and so we're going to these meetings, and it's like it is discipleship. Really, it is. It's interesting. Hey, show up for the sales meeting at 11. We're gonna have one tomorrow. We're gonna have one the next day, and then you're gonna come in. We're gonna hoorah, and we're gonna go out, and we're gonna sell our product. And so we're doing this over and over. But what we realize is we're not actually making money. We're spending a lot of time in meetings. And so one day we're on our way to this meeting. We're looking around. There's several people who had been in the organization for a really long time. And we're like, if that's the car they drive and they've been here this long, I don't think we want to have anything. We don't want to do this anymore. It's a waste of time. And we're just married. We want to hang out with each other. We don't want to go. So anyway, we're in this glass elevator. We go up to the third floor, and we're talking about this. We're having this dialogue. We've been having it for a couple of days now. At this point, the door opens, and we're on our way to another sales meeting. The hoorah, let's go. And we look at each other and go, do we really want to be doing this with our lives? If we aren't this passionate about sharing the gospel, how are we going to get passionate about sharing this? And so we look at each other. The door opens on this glass elevator, this glass door. We both stand against the wall, and the door closes, and we leave. And that was the end of that. But
wow.
It's interesting to play into this conversation.
That's pretty convicting, because I don't know how many people in sales today. They are crafty salesmen, and that
for sure. Yeah,
sales is manipulation. It's actually taking a person on a journey from here to here, and the initial location to the destination. The destination is a completed sale.
Yeah,
that's what sales is. That is a manipulation. That is moving somebody from one place to another. That doesn't mean that there's an evil intent behind the manipulation. And many times people actually need or truly actually desired the product in the first place.
Yeah,
but it is still a manipulation.
Right.
That actually goes into play in church as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So as an atheist, right? I come up to, I'm going through about a 2-year period where God's wooing me back to Him, or wooing me to Him. And I encounter a Christian who's willing to love on me. What he didn't do was berate me, take a Bible and start beating me over the head with it. He was loving me.
Yeah.
Right? He actually took me from where I was at, and something that I needed and I really, truly wanted, He guided me from here to that destination, and I gave my life to Christ, and that's been now 21 years.
Wow.
And there was a radical shift in who I was and how I acted, and all these other things. I was a social alcoholic, where basically I could go without drinking, but the second I took a sip, man, wheels are off, and I didn't stop until I was passed out or throwing up or whatever. I smoked for 14 years. All these things, all radically changed shortly after coming to Christ. All that being said, to kind of bring us back to this idea is so often that then what we see in society is now bleeding into the church. And when it comes to entertainment, man, now the lighting, and there are entire denominations where you're not allowed to have any instrument that gets plugged into a wall, right? You're not allowed to. So, and I almost envy that now. At certain points, I never understood it, because when I first came to Christ, I walked into a 10,000 person church. There was 4,700 seats in that sanctuary.
Wow.
I walk in. I had come to Christ before then, but I walk in and they strike up the guitars, and it felt like I was at the Manson concert that I was at just 3 months prior. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was at home and I could be there. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, if God is okay to be here, then God's okay to be there. So there is this, what I don't want to come across is going, if you plug in an instrument and there's electricity flowing through something, or if you have lights and things like that, you're of Satan. That is not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a balance here,
That's
and Bobby Boucher.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's of the devil. Yeah. No, so that's not what we're saying, right? Mm-hmm. There's a balance. So how do you even get to that? I actually had a story. I left a technology job because I walked into a multimillionaire's house, and he was irate and furious that he couldn't watch his Fox News or CNN or whatever it was. He had spent $150,000, almost $200,000 on TVs.
Wow.
And the most important thing in his life was watching his news. Mm. That he would get entertained the moment he woke up in the morning.
Wow.
And I realized, I went back kind of like what you're talking about. Like, I was struggling. I was like, is this really what God has called me to, is to make sure that people can watch their news in the morning? And it's a totally different aspect, a totally different place. But we have come to this place where we're out of balance. Mm-hmm. So how do you, in this arena, how do you actually balance that?
That's I would say that's a constant. That's something that's an ongoing dialogue in my life with my family. I have found myself kind of leaning in this season, specifically leaning towards a lot more liturgy. I mess up words, so sorry. Yeah. But I found myself. I want my kids to experience every facet of church. I took my son recently, last year actually, to a full-on Pentecostal revival night, and it was crazy.
Crazy good, crazy bad, just crazy?
Just all of the above. But I wanted him to have a context of where people meet Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And I think ultimately that is the desire of every person who's leading an organization that's called a church.
Yep.
Right? And some people get lost in the technology side of it, and it's about the, it's got to look a certain way. And I think there's a lot of like copycat too. Like, we got to look like Gateway, or we've got to look like Elevation Church. And the problem when you start going down that path is you lose sight of what you're really trying to do, and that's to reach people, right?
Yeah.
I want to be like Jesus. And so that conversation definitely is ongoing in my family. And I was thinking about this actually the last 2 days, kind of considering coming into this environment. And what I would say, because reality says I don't have the answer yet. I'm in process.
Yeah.
Right. I will say that right out front. We are in process. There's a lot of things off culturally in our church that we're trying to navigate. How do we, like where we're at, like just as an example, is like, we're like, man, I feel like God is moving us maybe in a certain direction, but we don't know where. And so what we've kind of done is we've said, okay, we know that it's important for our kids to go to church, right? So we've basically said we're going to go to church.
Yep. And
we're not going to go church shopping, like we've done that before.
Yeah.
And every church, when you go church shopping, what's interesting to me is you start critiquing, right? Yeah. You're like, oh, well, that church was pretty cool. I like the worship. The preaching was okay. Or that preaching was great, but the worship was a little loud. So we start critiquing. And so where we find ourselves is we're going to go to church. This is where we go to church for now. we're open for the Lord to move us. So that's kind of where we've landed. But all that to say, it kind of in the context, it is hard. It's hard to connect with the Lord for me as someone who's in technology, to connect with the Lord going, oh, man. For a long time, I just closed my eyes. But I found myself like, I need depth. I need to go deeper.
Yeah.
I need discipling. I've come to the place where discipling, it's almost like you stall out, right?
Yeah.
You get to that spot and you go, okay, I've heard every sermon series here. The worship is just kind of the same. It's and then you start questioning. Okay, I know people's motives are to connect with God that are showing up here, or you wouldn't show up. Why would you show up?
Yeah.
But
I guess religion would actually dictate. There are some people that are going to actually just come because that's what you're supposed to do.
Well,
right?
and I may lean to that too, and that's probably something I should navigate as well.
But might want to look into.
Yeah,
I was just saying because
no, you're right. Yeah.
One of the things you said is we need to make sure our kids are in church, and I'm sitting here. We have a house church, right?
Yeah.
And house church looks totally different than Western culture church, and for the most part. But what I need to also make sure when I say that is that people understand that the modality, the model of church doesn't dictate if God shows up in it.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
So that's one of the huge portions of it. Is so many people who are in the house church movement, they're shaming the big church movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the big church movement goes, oh, you guys in the house church, you guys are radical, whatever, and God can't, look, we're ministering to the thousands, you're ministering to the ones, right? And there's this.
When you hear you say that, you go, ooh. And what's wrong with that?
Yeah, so it's so hard. I'm like, Jesus only had 12.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm closer to Jesus. Now all of a sudden we're in this divided place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And Jesus himself was like, I want my body, my people, the people that reflect me. You're talking about discipleship. That's actually what discipleship is a process of turning you or allowing you, refining you into a reflection of the rabbi.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I think is so often missing, and what entertainment doesn't do. If we go to consume, if we go, okay, the children's ministry is great here. They're going to my kids are going to come home with coloring sheets, and they're going to come home excited, and I don't have to fight with them to get them to church. They can go.
Church is fun.
Church is fun.
Yeah.
Like that's a beneficial thing. Mm-hmm. But not everything God is fun. We talked in our last podcast, we talked about God wants to heal us of some of these hard things.
Yeah.
And those aren't always fun, right?
No.
There's if this world was just supposed to actually be all fluffy and whatnot, I think I think we have the wrong view of who God is when we think that everything in the world is just going to be this perfect, we're going to get to heaven and we're going to be sitting on clouds eating grapes, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. There's we have this distorted aspect that I think goes back even to the Roman entertainment aspect, where they sat there laying back and people are feeding them grapes while they watch the play. It's like, entertain me, feed me more content, right?
Yeah.
And here's the weird balance is we're literally
creating content. Right, for sure.
So am I actually feeding? Like, how do we balance this? It's
you're
so
right
hard.
on target in asking that question, I think. And I've been asking that question as well, being in a space where we create tons of content. Where I'm currently working in is, it's a mix between Christian and then there's a secular side. And we are creating content. The goal is to create content that's family friendly, so that you're not going to watch something that's like, cover your eyes, kids. Because
turn your head. That's what we say all the time. Turn.
Yeah, and the kids, I don't want to see that. My kids don't want to see that, and that's great. But yeah, it is. The content question is interesting, and it's all about. I think something that I thought about that I want to kind of bring into this conversation, that as I'm processing this, how do you balance that? And for me, it's an ongoing conversation in my home right now. For the last probably since 2020. There's the church shut down. We all kind of went home. It changed the way we look at church. Funny thing, like when we did that, kind of off on a side branch, we were reading George Mueller.
Okay.
2020. If you've never read the story of George Mueller, this guy was a missionary, had all these orphans. Do you know who George Mueller is?
I have heard.
Okay.
Couldn't quote the story right off the top of my head.
So George Mueller is this guy, and he's all about prayer. Like, he's like, if God wants to do it, we're going to pray. And there's crazy stories. He's got this is in Bristol. Lots of parents died because of plagues and stuff. He brings them in, and he's, because God radically transforms his life. He's super wealthy and affluent.
Yeah.
God radically changed his life. He becomes he becomes a pastor, and then anyway, if you ever have a chance, go read it. It'll wreck your life because he's a man of prayer. There's stories of him sitting with the orphans. There's no food, and they're like, let's sit down to eat, kids. Let's pray. And they sit down, they all know George Mueller's a prayer. He prays, knock on the door, right? And it's just awesome. It's an awesome example of what God can do, right?
Yeah.
You're reading that, and you're seeing your church close because of this virus. That'll mess your life up for a minute.
Yeah.
That'll make you ask a lot of different questions. And but what I've discovered, fast forward to today, this process has been really slow for us. It hasn't been because we went and tried a church for a season. Felt like it wasn't where we were supposed to be. We came back to Gateway, and every day my wife's like, we need to get plugged into the church that we're gonna because our kids are getting into youth group age.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what are we gonna do about this? We really want them to have those connections and relationships.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this has been slow. This hasn't been easy. This has been a journey that we're on, and it's there's a lot of different dynamics and questions. The entertainment is one of the questions.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? And it's it's been so slow. It hasn't been this home church is the answer. Because we kind of thought about going down that route. We haven't jumped that way, but it's but I think it's slow because what it's doing is it's developing and setting a foundation for the next thing that God wants to do in our family.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to be quick, or we shouldn't.
Yeah. The whole thing within the house church or micro churches as they call it, it ends up being a richer community.
For sure.
But at the same time, one of the first house churches that we walked into, the only people that we talked to were the people that we talked to, that we initiated the conversation with, because that micro church, because that house church got so connected, intimate, that they then actually went into what I've heard it called holy huddles, where all of a sudden we're just locking arms instead of actually being opening and welcoming.
Yeah.
Well, the second that a house church has to actually have a greeting party, then your house church is probably too big.
Yeah.
It's no longer a micro church. It's just a small mega church, right? Or a small normal church. Once you start actually doing that,
well, you use the word normal, which is funny because
Western culture,
we're
right?
learning.
Yeah. Right. So there's a lot of depth in this.
Yeah.
But this entertainment aspect, I think what we expect out of church, there is balance. Mm-hmm. If we look to the pastor for our relationship as a mediator to God, then we actually worship the pastor, not God.
For sure, yeah.
Paul literally talks about it multiple times. He's like, look, if you're talking about worshiping me or you follow me, then you got it wrong, right? I'm screwed up just like you guys are. You need to, yes, I'm an apostle, but I'm going after him. I'm still striving to actually mirror Jesus.
And we forget too that that's a man. And that man's going to make mistakes.
Right?
And those mistakes will hurt us.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so we bank too much on that leadership. It's interesting. I don't know if you want to go here, but so something my wife and I talk about a lot is we have been involved in a megachurch for a long time. And something we've noticed is that as a megachurch grows, the leadership structure has to grow. So they have to figure out a way, kind of like the Moses model, where you're over 50, over 100. And so you see this growth happening. Well, what we kind of started noticing was, as that growth happens, as you're hiring bigger staffs to manage more stuff, what we I think got frustrated by, what was hard for us, is we would see this staff of people, and it felt like the staff of people were experiencing what we would consider church from an Acts 2 perspective, right? They had access to the shepherd. They had access to the discipleship at a personal level. So they're all having this experience. Well, me as a church member would show up, and in a sense, like, it wasn't completely holy huddle, but there was definitely an understanding that, oh, this is the pastors, right? These are the staff member. These are the people, and you could tell, like, they have a relationship. They have a depth of, like, community that goes deeper than just a Sunday morning experience. And that's a hard thing to look at, and something that should be considered whenever your church starts growing to a certain level, is that, like, the actual, like, what we want in a church is discipleship. Here's what you would call the apprenticeship. And who's getting the apprenticeship? It's the staff. And what does that look like? Well, it's actually kind of like a small group of followers inside of this organization that are actually going out and doing the work.
Yeah, we're probably gonna have to actually come back and have a whole nother podcast just on that one, because we could talk for probably days even on that. And we're gonna actually wrap up here in just a couple of moments. But what I'm hearing from you in this balancing of our desires to be entertained, and where entertainment and the church come together, there is no one answer.
For sure,
And when people continue to label and compare and critique, that's not where God's heart is. His heart is in the people, and he will use the church, any church, despite the people that are there, not because of the people there.
Right. Yes, that's a good point.
Right? Those people are going to fail. They're going to mess up. They're going to hurt you. They're going to disappoint you. There is going to be ugly stuff that is going to happen, because we're human.
We're people.
We have the choice to actually mess up. Right? I love Viktor Frankl's quote that between the stimulus and the response, humans have the choice. And so often we mess up and make the wrong or a hurtful choice. So just know that wherever you're getting plugged in, that God is capable of moving despite the people there, not because of them. If you're in a messed up church, pray and ask God if you're supposed to be there, number one, because if he says no, then don't go. Find somewhere where he's leading you actually be. But the number one thing that we want to let you guys know of when you're watching our podcast, with everything with Now Found, is that you are never too lost to be found. If you have found this to be beneficial to you, please share it with your friends and family. Continue to encourage them as this has maybe encouraged you. And we thank you so much for being a part of this ministry. If you want more free resources or want to support our ministry, you can go to nowfound.org. And thank you guys so much. God bless. We love you.